shadows of history.
Southeast Asia didn't just grow, it transformed. Over the span of a few decades, the region shifted from fragmented economies into a connected, strategically important global player. Officially, this transformation was driven by cooperation, trade agreements, and regional integration. Organizations like ASEAN played a central role in aligning policies and encouraging growth. But large-scale changes like this rarely happen on the surface alone. Because behind every public agreement, there are conversations that never make it into official records. Informal alignments, strategic compromises, decisions made quietly, away from cameras. The question is not whether ASEAN evolved. It clearly did. The question is how much of that evolution was shaped by forces that were never fully documented. Because in politics, what is visible is only part of the story. ASEAN was formed in 1967 during a period of intense geopolitical tension. Southeast Asia was not just a region, it was a strategic zone in the Cold War. The founding members sought stability, cooperation, and a way to reduce conflict within the region. Over time, ASEAN expanded, bringing more countries into its framework. Its primary strength was not force, but coordination. It created a platform where nations with different political systems could align on key issues. This alignment was not always simple. It required negotiation, compromise, and long-term strategy. And while official agreements defined its structure, much of its effectiveness came from how those agreements were interpreted and implemented behind the scenes. Because in regional politics, formal unity often depends on informal understanding. In 1992, ASEAN entered a new phase, one defined not just by political cooperation, but by economic integration. The creation of the ASEAN Free Trade Area marked a significant shift in how the region approached trade. Tariffs were reduced, barriers began to fall, and for the first time, Southeast Asia started positioning itself as a unified economic zone rather than a collection of separate markets. On paper, the objective was clear: increase competitiveness, attract investment, and strengthen regional resilience. And it worked. Trade volumes grew, foreign capital increased, infrastructure expanded rapidly. But integration at this scale requires coordination beyond formal agreements. Policies must align, timelines must be synchronized, and national interests must be negotiated carefully. Because while integration creates opportunity, it also creates imbalance. Some economies benefit faster than others. Some industries expand while others struggle. And in that imbalance, power begins to shift, quietly but significantly. Economic integration did not distribute benefits evenly. While ASEAN presented itself as a unified bloc, internal differences remained significant. Larger economies, those with stronger industrial bases and better infrastructure, were positioned to gain more from increased trade and investment. Countries like Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia became key hubs for manufacturing and exports. Meanwhile, smaller or less developed economies faced greater challenges in keeping pace. This imbalance is not unique to ASEAN. It is a common outcome in regional integration, but it has consequences. As certain countries become more central to the economic system, their influence increases. They gain leverage in negotiations, greater control over supply chains, and a stronger voice in regional decisions. Power in this context is not declared, it emerges. And once it emerges, it shapes how future agreements are formed, how crises are managed, and how... By the mid-1990s, Southeast Asia was experiencing one of the fastest economic expansions in the world. Growth rates were high, investment was strong, and confidence, both locally and internationally, was rising. Cities expanded rapidly, infrastructure projects multiplied, and financial markets reflected this optimism. But beneath the surface, vulnerabilities were forming. Rapid growth had been fueled in part by external capital, short-term borrowing, and increasingly complex financial structures. Exchange rates were under pressure, debt levels were rising, and while the system appeared stable, it was becoming more sensitive to external shocks. This is often how crises develop, not through sudden collapse, but through gradual imbalance. Warning signs exist, but they are not always recognized in time. And when confidence is high, those signs are often overlooked, because in moments of rapid growth, the focus is on expansion, not stability. In 1997, the system was tested in a way no one could ignore. The Asian financial crisis spread rapidly across the region, exposing structural weaknesses that had been building beneath the surface. Currencies collapsed, markets destabilized, growth came to a sudden halt. For ASEAN, this was more than an economic event, it was a turning point. The crisis forced governments to make critical decisions under pressure. Policies that might have taken years to negotiate were implemented in months. External institutions stepped in, internal alignments shifted, and in moments like this, decisions are not always made publicly. Because crisis changes the rules, it accelerates timelines, compresses negotiations, and creates conditions where silent agreements become not just possible, but necessary. When the crisis hit, the response was immediate but complex. Governments across Southeast Asia were forced to act quickly to stabilize their economies. At the same time, international institutions such as the International Monetary Fund became deeply involved in the recovery process. Financial assistance was provided, but it came with conditions, policy reforms, structural adjustments, and long-term commitments that would reshape national economies. Within ASEAN, coordination became more critical than ever. Countries needed to align their responses, manage cross-border impacts, and maintain regional stability. In this environment, decisions were made under pressure, often within limited time frames. And when time is limited, processes change. Negotiations become more direct, compromises become necessary, and some discussions move beyond formal channels. Because in moments of crisis, the priority is not process, it is survival. Was there a single silent political deal that reshaped power in ASEAN? The evidence does not point to a definitive answer. There is no single document, no confirmed record that captures such a moment. But history rarely operates through single events. Instead, it moves through sequences, decisions made across different locations by different actors, often without a unified narrative. During the late 1990s, the conditions for informal coordination were present. Crisis created urgency, economic pressure created alignment, and regional interdependence created a need for cooperation beyond formal agreements. In such conditions, it is reasonable to consider that certain understandings, implicit or explicit, may have emerged, not as a hidden conspiracy, but as a practical response to a shared challenge. These understandings may not be documented clearly, but their effects can still be observed in how the region evolved after the crisis. After the crisis, ASEAN did not collapse, it adapted. Policies were restructured, financial systems were strengthened, and regional coordination became more consistent. The crisis had revealed weaknesses, but it had also created an opportunity to realign. Countries that once competed more directly began to cooperate more strategically. Mechanisms for economic coordination improved, and over time, ASEAN emerged more integrated than before. But integration also meant that influence became more defined. Certain countries took on larger roles, decision-making structures evolved, and the balance of power within the region became more structured, even if it was not always formally acknowledged. This is how power shifts, gradually, through response, adaptation, and necessity, not always through clear declarations, but through outcomes that shape the future of the region. ASEAN today is stronger, more connected, and more influential than ever before. Its growth is documented, its policies are visible, and its impact is measurable. But history is not only defined by what is recorded, it is also shaped by what is implied, negotiated, and sometimes left unsaid. The idea of a silent political deal may never be proven in a single document, but the conditions for such decisions, crisis, pressure, and strategic necessity, have existed, and when those conditions align, outcomes can change rapidly. Whether through formal agreements or informal coordination, power does not remain static. It shifts, it adapts, and often it does so quietly. If you want to understand the forces shaping history beyond official narratives, subscribe to Shadows of History, where we don't just follow events,
we question what moves behind them.